Good evening, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome back to Monday Moments with Patrina L. I thank you so much for tuning in. Truly, today has been a blessing, a blessed day, and I thank you again for watching. Those of you that are coming in, come on in, come on in. Remember to like, share, comment. Uh, you can always watch the replay. You can always catch us on youtube.com at EPL Ministry 1779. When you get over there, please subscribe, hit the all button, and that way you could get a notification every time something new is posted on the YouTube channel. But thank you so much for tuning in to Monday Moments with Patrina L. Listen, last week we started something. We were talking about the topic of depression. I have this young lady here, Rogjett Peterson, who is a clinical therapist who works in the Metro Detroit area. She has two master's degrees, y'all. Two master's degrees. That means she's extra smart. One from the University of Michigan and one from Azusa Pacific University in California. Rogjett is very passionate about tearing down the stigma of mental health, and especially in the melanated population. Look, we heard about, I'm sure everybody heard about the shooting that took place down in Florida. And this young man wanted to kill off black people. And they're saying that he has been dealing with mental issues for a while. Well, what her passion is, she wants to address and deal with this in our community, because let's face it, back in the day, it wasn't addressed as having mental issues. They would say basically either they was crazy or what was it, uh all that word left me. Mm. Nevertheless, this is her passion, and she went to school for it to help us get ourselves together. Okay? And there's no shame in it. As uh, one of my loved ones said, don't be shy. Don't be shy about it. That's why we're in the predicament we're in today, because we be shy. Don't be shy about it. Acknowledge you need help and go after the help. Welcome, Rogjett, back. I thank you again for coming on, for accepting the invitation. You're such a sweetheart.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Listen, do me a favor and recap a little bit of last week.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, thank you for having me. I felt like it was a great discussion last week, and so I'm just happy to be here again and to kind of dive into a little bit more. So last week we talked a little bit about just kind of what depression was, right? And there's a lot to depression, right? And so I didn't get into too many of the weeds of it, but just really wanted us to at least have um, some knowledge about what to look for when people are dealing with depression, right? Whether that's yourself or somebody else, pay attention to people's rhythms, right? Like how are they functioning on a daily, right? Like what do those rhythms look like? And when those rhythms start changing, maybe that's a moment where you're more in tune and paying attention to like, okay, something's a little different with so and so.
Mm-hmm.
It's important that you understand that symptoms of depression can range from being minimal, mild, to severe in nature. And so, typically, our clinical definition of, of depression is primarily going to be focused on the moderate to severe aspects. Okay. And basically, if you have been dealing with the symptoms more than 2 weeks at a time, then that's really when you want to start getting some help. And those symptoms can look like loss of motivation and things that used to give you joy, right? Or loss of interest in activities that you used to engage in. A lot of times there's some social isolation that will take place, so you're no longer engaging with people. And some people will do that to safeguard themselves. You know, the safe space is let me just be in my own sort of for lack of a better word. But retreating in that way is not healthy, right? Because you're not getting um, any type of engagement with other folks, and so you're just kind of left to you and your mind in those moments. So it's really not a healthy space to be in. A lot of people will be hypersomniac, so maybe they're sleeping way more than they used to sleep. And in some cases, there's insomnia, right? They're not able to sleep enough. Okay. Um, Overeating is often attributed to depression as well as losing weight. Okay, so again, just paying attention to the rhythms. What did you used to do that looks really different at this point? Of course, if you start to um, notice that people are speaking in a way that might be just kind of like dark or negative or pessimistic, pay attention to those things as well. If you're noticing that what used to make people laugh, right? Maybe you used to hang out with some folks and they used to laugh a lot, or maybe they were the life of the party and they're no longer engaging in that way. That's also something. They're just not finding that enjoyment, right? That's something to be mindful of. Also thinking about psychomotor activity. So some people are, if you've really dealt with anybody who's gone through some severe, a lot of times you will see that their movements are slow. So
Mm.
like them like walking or transitioning physically, like literally have slow movements or slow speech. Okay, so that's also something to pay attention to as well. Um,
Wow.
yeah, we talked about how food can impact our
Yeah.
mood well, right? And so depending on what we're consuming, we talked about sugar and high fat foods, how that can actually increase uh, the likelihood that you experience some depressed symptoms because of how it impacts dopamine and serotonin within your brain activity. Um, I can't remember what else we touched on last week. I think that was pretty much it. We dove into a lot of things, but oh, we hit grief last week. We talked
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
yeah, we talked about just what that can look like, and we didn't really dive too much into how to kind of maneuver through some of the grief, but some just quick aspects of that. If you're dealing with grief right now, um, it's really important to try to honor the person who has passed away. Maybe it looks like writing a letter to them because maybe you didn't have certain closure, right? And you feel like you need that closure. So writing a letter to them. Maybe it's memorializing the day that they passed away, right? With something. So every year on this particular day, we're going to celebrate this person, right? And having taking that intentional time to remember them. For some people, it's having pictures and putting together a collage and being involved in that process so that the healing can begin to take place. Those are some that I know have worked for me personally. Definitely the writing the letters, right? Um,
Hmm.
we talked about different coping mechanisms last week.
Yeah.
Journaling being one of those. We had some grounding techniques that we'll get into again today. There was one that we went over that we'll go back over today, but there's a lot of different aspects of being able to cope. So writing out your problems, any type of stressors that you have going on, engaging in self-care activities, super important, right? It's really difficult for us to sometimes carve out time to really just focus on the things that matter to us, right? Like we,
Yeah.
we have so many roles that we have so many roles that we engage in, right? Whether we're a parent, a student, um, a daughter, or a son, like we have a lot of different hats that we wear, and throughout the day, sometimes we neglect our own selves, right?
Yes.
Because we're thinking
Yes.
of everybody else, and so it's important for us to at least engage in a self care activity. I try to recommend folks to do that. If you can't do it every day, do it every couple days. Like, and, be intentional about that. Put it on your schedule, self care activity, whatever that is.
Okay.
You can actually be accountable to actually doing it. It's important, to have a group of strong support, like whatever your support network looks like. Um,
Okay.
especially if you have a history of depression, right, or sort of having these low moods, and the people in your network know that, then there can be some signals maybe that they can look for, right? I know I've been transparent about the depression that I've gone through, because of grief and some things in my past, traumatic events in my past. Um, with my own group of friends and just circle of influence, if I'm ever not connecting for a long period of time, I
Uh-huh.
have friends who call me out on that. Like, hey, we about to pull up if you're not if you don't respond. Like I've called you in a couple of times and I haven't heard anything back. Like, what's going on?
Okay.
Ready to show up, right? And so I've got friends who know that, okay, if I'm not responding, something might be off a little bit, right? And then
Yeah. Yeah.
it's good to have a network of people that you can be vulnerable with, right? That know this side of you if this is something that you're experiencing, because they can, obviously be a support to you, to help encourage you, can pray for you, stand in the gap, but like they also can be there as accountability, right? Like, hey, let's go do something, even if you don't
Yeah.
feel like, let's come on anyway, right? Um, Exercise is also super important. When you start working out or engaging in any type of physical activity, that can boost your mood, right? And so,
Okay.
it doesn't have to be anything super arduous or involved. It literally can be, let me go for a walk every day. Let me take a 5-minute walk, a 10-minute walk, to help boost your mood and just kind of get you grounded a little bit. Um, Thinking about changing your diet, right? Because of the impact of how the impact of foods on your mental health, and engaging your senses, right? Anytime we can bring our senses into the equation, it's a good thing because it helps us be mindful, be present in the right now. A lot of times we're so focused on what's going to happen or what we think is going to happen, or we're so caught up in what has already happened, right? And start thinking about those things. And sometimes it's hard for us to really engage in the here and now because we have so many things just constantly running through our mind. And so
Yeah.
engage our senses, thinking about, what you smell in your environment, what you hear in your environment, what
Mm.
you touch, what you see. All of those things ground you back to the present moment so that you're not so focused on the things ahead or in the past. We talked about laughter as medicine, right? Like having, moments where you're engaging in, watching sitcoms or something funny, right? Engaging in some type of funny event.
Yeah.
Things, and I'll be transparent here. I have a therapist, and I don't know if I said that in the last time that we met.
Yeah.
Um, but I remember when I was kind of going through a depressive episode. Like I'm somebody who loves to watch true crime or listen to true crime podcasts, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Kind of just veg out through at times. And what I recognized is that through therapy is that, hey, this might not be the best time for you to engage in those things. Like,
Uh-huh.
don't necessarily listen to true crime because of the spirit behind it, right? And so if I'm already feeling low, now I'm watching something or I'm listening to something where people have been murdered and they're trying to solve a case. That's not necessarily the best mindset to be in when you're trying to heal and move forward and get some, have a more positive outlook on things. Um,
Right.
we talked about having a gratitude journal, right? Um, every day, at the end of the day, maybe sitting down and reflecting on three great things or three good things that you accomplished in the day. And they could be really, they don't have to be these major things. It could be, I got up and I brushed my teeth today because maybe you've been dealing with depression for some time and it's really difficult for you to even get so difficult for you to put clothes on or get into the shower. A gratitude journal, you can, at the end of the day, like, hey, I got out of my bed today, right? And that's an accomplishment. And I really want you to, focus on the accomplishments, the little wins or the small wins is what I call it. Like celebrate the small wins of the day. Um, and then, meditation and prayer we talked about and the importance of that. Of course,
Yeah.
anytime you sit and you can have some dedicated time where you're reflecting on, the physical audience, the Word of God or any type of meditation
Yes.
you do, it's a good practice because side of yourself, you're connecting with the divine in those moments. And then just uh, taking time, even when you're feeling practical moods, taking a moment to focus on somebody else and and trying to help them or encourage them because you're taking the lens off of you. And oftentimes, when we help other people, we feel better about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of a recap, brief recap of
Yeah.
what last week. Yeah, we had a good discussion last week for sure.
Yeah, we did. We did. I got word that it was very informative, and it was. I do agree. Look, we had a question that we had to table. Do every emotional issue have need for a therapist?
So I love this question. And basically, I like to first answer it with the question, like, does every person need insurance? Right.
Uh huh.
The reason I asked that, because I just wanted everybody to kind of just pause there. Every emotional issue doesn't necessarily need a therapist, but it's not a problem to have one. Just like with insurance, like you don't necessarily need insurance, right? But it's a good idea to have insurance
Right.
when you do need it, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I will say this: when it comes to depression, anxiety, or any other type of mental health issue that folks are dealing with, the moment it starts impacting your daily functioning, that's when you really need to start paying some real attention to it. You need to pay attention to it before then, but when you realize, like, okay, the things that I do every day, I'm having a really difficult time doing those things, then it's like, all right, let me think about and going to get assessed or evaluated or seeking out professional help. I am of the idea that everybody should have a therapist, just like everybody has a dentist, and just like everybody has a doctor. Like I personally believe that's just me. I personally believe that everybody should have a therapist. At
Uh
this
huh.
having a therapist is accessible for a lot of folks because if you have public insurance, it's covered for the most part under there, so you have access. For those who have private insurance, of course there's going to be some type of copay that you may have to pay, so it can get a little expensive, but at this point we all have some degree of access to mental health services and providers. And while there may be a wait list, because that's a thing, it may take you
Yeah.
a few to be seen. The reality is it is accessible though, whereas it didn't used to be as accessible for
Yeah.
all. Right? So within our community, I just believe that it's important to have one. It doesn't mean you need to see them all the time. You could go years without it, but I think it's important um, person to have in your life to kind of help you sift through things, kind of work through what you're having challenges with. But again, if it's impacting your daily functioning, that's definitely a good sign that it's like, all right, let me get somebody else involved in this.
Okay. Okay. So, like you say, relating it to insurance, it's always better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay. That's very good. Once you start therapy though, and
Mhm.
you feel like you're doing good, you've gotten better, should you continue with the therapy, or
Um,
should you just stop, or maybe slow it up, or you
so
know?
all of the above. I feel like if you start to feel some good headway. Things are going pretty well. Again, if your daily functioning is resumed back to, you know, something manageable, right?
Mhm.
Then it may be in your best interest to take a break. Like that's okay. Like take a break. I do believe in, taking a break, but I believe in maintenance. So let's say you've had a therapist for, I don't know, 6 months, and you're meeting with that therapist weekly. And in some cases, depending on the severity or the acuity, it might be twice a week. So let's say for 6 months you've been meeting with somebody, and at that 6 month uh, point where now there's some reevaluation that's happening, kind of doing a check in to see like what type of progress has been made over that time. Let's say the client says, you know what, I think I'm in a good space. I'm going to stop therapy. I am I'm okay with that as long as I'm seeing like there's good progress that's being made. I'm
Yeah.
not push back. Obviously, everybody has the agency to make whatever decision they want to make, right? But I will say that I think it's important to do check-ins. So maybe this might look like you have gone 6 months. Now, what if we take it to let me check in once a month with you? How's that work? Or
Okay.
maybe once a month is is too long or too far in between from going every week, twice a week over 6 months. Maybe it's can we do once every 2 weeks for a while?
Okay. Okay. Okay.
I know folks who literally will do a check in 2, 3 times a year
Mhm.
just to kind of check in, like, okay, I'm feeling pretty good. And here's the other thing. I think um I think a lot of us approach therapy with this mindset of the therapist is here to fix our problems, right? Like we
Mhm.
have a problem, we go to therapy. But I'm kind of the thought that you don't necessarily have to have a problem to go to therapy. Therapy is a tool. Right? Therapy is a tool. It,
Okay.
it's one more thing that you can utilize in your toolbox to kind of help you maneuver through this really hard thing called life,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's a tool. And so it's just okay, do I need to use this tool right now?
Okay.
Like that's
Yeah.
that's the thing about therapy. Once you've gotten better, that's great. But I think it's a good idea to, still have your therapist, in your contacts list. Don't just get rid of them. We talked last week about having a good fit, like a therapist with a good fit, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
True, because obviously, like, if you've been spending time with your therapist, you feel like it's not going anywhere, then it may be okay, let's take a break and let's reevaluate. You might need to pivot or, go to a different therapist. But if you have found success with the therapist, I think it's a good idea to do check-ins, just like you would with annual checkups and all the rest of the stuff. With
Yeah.
month dental, right? Like it's just doing a checkup. I think a lot of times, and this ties back to the stigma and just kind of the evolution of psychology and um, just neurology and everything. Um, we sometimes forget or we don't think about our mind and our brain as connected to the rest of our body. And I know that sounds weird when I say that, but
Yeah.
literally, like if we get injured, let's say we break our arm or we sprain our wrist or something, we go to the doctor. We're not at home just like chilling. Most of us are not. Some
Right.
people,
Right.
we go to the doctor to get assessed and then see, what needs to come of that, right?
Uh-huh.
If we have a headache, we take medicine. A lot of us will take a Tylenol, right, just
Right.
to get rid of the headache.
Right.
Um, if we are diabetic, we have to take our diabetes medicine. We have to
Right.
a certain type of way, right, in order to
Right.
manage that, right? But for whatever reason, when we start thinking about this mind and this brain of ours, which
Right.
is literally like the most complex organ in our body,
Mhm. Mhm.
we don't think of it in those same terms. Like
Right.
thinking problem. I've got something going on in my brain with the
Right.
neural and everything happening, and it's just stuff just seems off and different.
Mhm.
You just want to sit at home and just say, well, I'm just gonna pray it away. Okay, you can pray some things away, and I'm not here to say that prayer doesn't work, but
Right.
you've used the tools that have been afforded to you, and I believe that therapy is one of those tools.
Yeah.
So just you would check out on the sprained wrist that you have. If you've got something going on in your mental health, you've got to get that assessed and treated.
Yeah. You mentioned praying. Um and touched it a little bit last week when I asked the question about um uh faith relating to depression.
Sure.
So, can you elaborate a little bit on the spiritual abuse that would lead to depression?
So this
Um,
is such
I,
a loaded
I know I'm opening some doors here, but I mean just a little bit. If you could do it, just a little bit, just
and
um,
it's such an important question. It's a loaded question for sure.
uh huh,
I feel like we could have like tons of conversations on this, but um, the thing about spiritual abuse, first of all, we need to really think about what is abuse, right? And so, like the definition of abuse is, generally speaking, it's defined as any action that intentionally harms or injures another person.
mhm,
That's it in its most generic form. Now, when we start talking about spiritual abuse, if it's discussed at all in the context of church, some examples would be like, a church elder or a leader or faith leader inflicting abuse on congregation members,
mhm,
often done by creating a toxic culture or environment within that church or that group, right? And then oftentimes it can look like, that person in that position of power shaming or controlling members, right? And they're using their position, the power of their position to do that.
wow,
Does that make sense?
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. So, obviously there's that aspect of spiritual abuse and the literal physical spiritual abuse that we know has gone on in churches and groups. Um, but when it comes down to spiritual abuse or any abuse, there's always a connection between um, power and that abuse. There's a relationship between power, the power dynamic, and abuse. Okay,
mhm,
so that you see somebody that's in an abusive relationship, or if you're in an abusive relationship, there's always going to be one person that is trying to assert more control over the other person.
mhm, mhm,
That's kind of like the definition of abuse, right? There's going to be one person that exerts power or control, or at least tries to do that with the other person. And while we see that in terms of sexual abuse, we see it in domestic abuse. It also happens in spiritual abuse, right? In spiritual settings, because you do often have a priest or a pastor or somebody in a position of leadership who is in that power position.
mhm,
And depending on who's going to be attached to them, right? Like and I'm being real careful here, but the victim, right? Whoever's experiencing that type of abuse, they don't necessarily have the power, and so what happens is they get stuck in that dynamic,
yeah,
and it's hard to resist it. It's hard to stand up against it because of the power dynamic.
yes, okay, yeah. I knew with that is a door that many don't want to open.
I'm here for it. I'm here for open like shy away from it because I've seen it, right?
Yeah,
Like my own self, I've experienced it. I'm not going to go into too much of it today,
yeah,
but
right,
I've
right,
experienced it. I have watched others go through it. I have counseled those who have gone through it. And it's not just in the black church, right, or the
yeah,
black
yeah,
community. And so I am somebody who is like, no, let's talk about the spiritual abuse, because I think just most abusers know that they're abusing,
mhm,
right? Like I don't know an abuser who doesn't know that they're abusing, right?
right, right,
underneath that power structure, the people who are being impacted don't always know that what they're in is abuse, right? They
Mm-hmm.
don't know they're in it. They just know that maybe they're just being controlled, right? But they don't necessarily know that that's abuse. And that could be for a multitude of reasons. Like maybe they grew up in an abusive household, right? And all they know is that type of
That's all
dynamic,
they know. Right. Mm-hmm.
normal, right, behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Like that. Or for those, who have dealt with sexual abuse or emotional or financial abuse, even, right, which is another type of abuse. If that's all that they've known, then that can become a very comfortable setting, kind of like comfortably uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
like you're in it because it's what you've always known, but it's uncomfortable because you don't really know how to get out of it, right? And so
Right.
it's really challenging to get out of a spiritually abusive or any abusive relationship. Oftentimes it comes down to having to make a decision, not necessarily based on how you feel, because you could be feeling a lot of different ways, even a connection to the abuser, right?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Matter of, let's make a concrete decision. I'm not going to be in this relationship anymore. And that is hard to come by often because of the condition that takes place.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Good stuff. In the recap, you were talking about some of last week, and you mentioned a few things which relates to this next question. So we're gonna go back a little bit and go over the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I tell you, that really captured. Sometimes people say things that kind of stick with you,
Mhm.
and I was trying to write that down, and I kept getting my numbers mixed up with what. But yeah, go over that again. That 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's a coping strategy, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a grounding or coping strategy. Basically, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's primarily used when folks are having anxiety, which is something that often is we call it comorbid or co-occurs with depression. Like a lot of people who have depression also have anxiety, right? So we often are treating both. But 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is, you heard me earlier talk about us engaging our senses, right? So
Mm.
let's say we're hyperstimulated. There's a lot that's going on, whether it's you going dealing with grief and your mind is kind of everywhere, or if you're panicky, you're literally in a anxious kind of state of mind. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 is focusing on your senses. So you're taking a moment to just get grounded right to the present moment. And so what this is you engaging through this process by finding 5 things in your immediate environment, 5 things that you can see, and then you name those things. You look around. Some people will even say, 5 red things that you
Oh
see.
wow. Okay.
Even more, right? 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can hear. And so now you're listening, because a lot of times we just maneuver through, life and space without paying attention to all the things that are going on. Like
Hmm.
we're talking to each other, but there's sounds that are happening around us that we're not attuned to, right? And
Right.
um, so 5 things you can see, 4 things that you can hear. So I would pause, listen for 4 things. Like when I put my air conditioner, I feel a little feedback from the mics that's playing out between us talking. I hear my chair squeaking every time I kind of move. Um, I can hear the cricket outside my window that I can kind of hear. So that's just kind of, again, getting me focused in the present moment. So that's 4 things that I can hear.
Okay.
3 things that I can smell.
Uh-huh.
So you would just go through whatever 3 things you can smell. And sometimes you might not be able to notice those things, but the whole point of the exercise is to ground you in the right now, right? So if you only have 2 things, then you only have two. But 3 things that you can smell, 2 things that you can touch, and then
Okay.
literally touch them. Literally touch them. I have my mason jar full of water. I've got my computer mouse, two things I can touch. And then one thing I can taste. And that one gets weird for people sometimes because they're just like, what? They may have something in their mouth. Maybe they're chewing gum, but maybe they can taste the, dinner that they had. So they can identify a taste, right?
Okay.
And so that's just, it's what we call a grounding activity, and it is a type of coping strategy. And anytime you can engage your senses, that'll help ground you. Another grounding technique that I like to use is called safe space visualization. And so this might be when somebody is really anxious about something, or maybe just really emotionally dysregulated. Maybe they're feeling like they're in harm's way or something, threatened by something. It's kind of going to a safe space in your mind. So it's envisioning whatever that safe space is for you, right? And so maybe it's a place you've been before, maybe it's a place you want to go, maybe it's just a fantasy world, right? But then while you're envisioning that space, you're engaging your senses. So, like for me, I love sunflowers, as you can see. And
Okay.
so one of the safe space visualizations that I like to like envision when I'm feeling stressed or whatever is me being in a sunflower field, sitting in a chair.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I just visualize it. I'm in the sunflower without the bees, because the bees can go on and be great somewhere else.
Yeah.
But I'm in a sunflower field, and then as I'm envisioning this, I'm getting in tune with my senses. What do I smell in that field? What do I see in that field? What do I feel in that field? What do I taste in that field? What do I touch in that field?
Oh wow. Okay.
Giving me a moment to really just kind of create some calm, right? And,
Hmm.
and this couple of techniques.
That's pretty good because even just now with you going through it, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, I felt ease
Hmm.
come over me, you know, just while you were, listening on your end. I'm like, yeah, what is it that I do here?
Okay.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. Yeah, I got
Good.
my notes. Okay, so
I'm glad about
I
it.
will be using that one for sure. I know I will be, and I know this wasn't a question that was given ahead of time, but with children, would this work for children?
I think it's so important to teach our young people these types of coping strategies. When you think about it, um, we didn't, and I say we just generally, speaking generally, within our community, we didn't necessarily learn a lot of healthy coping mechanisms,
Right.
right? And so for young people to be able to have these skills early, I think it's incredible, right? So if you teach a kid when they're feeling overwhelmed by something, maybe they're crying, maybe they're lashing out, maybe they're angry, whatever the emotion is, but you've taught them how to take a moment and do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 to ground them. That's something they can take with them for life, right?
Uh,
Also breathing techniques, right? Like, look, the reality is nobody teaches us how to breathe. Like, if you really think about it, we don't learn how to breathe unless we're maybe in a particular competitive sport, or maybe like if you played a wind instrument.
hmm.
From those two things, no one has taught us how to breathe.
Right.
But breathing is one of the most powerful ways that we can regulate our automatic nervous system. Okay, and so this is why you've maybe seen in movies, you see somebody get really stimulated or aggravated, or something happens, and then somebody else is kind of coaching them, like, breathe with me, or just take a minute and breathe, like, to calm them down.
Hmm.
That's something that I feel like we just don't put enough emphasis or put enough focus on how important our breath is to us. And I would say this, like, in in my experience, so I'm generalizing a little bit here, but I'm speaking specifically just my experience of, being in particular churches with particular power, we'll say. When you start talking about breath work or meditation, sometimes, it's almost like the spooky spiritual, right? Like
Hmm.
what we're talking about, and people think you're getting too deep or, something like that. But the reality is, this is all scientific, right? You take some time and do some deep breathing. There's something that's called box breathing or square breathing, that I think is important for all of us to learn, and definitely children. Um, this is where you can kind of envision a square or a box in your head. And basically, it goes like this: you inhale for a count of four, you hold for a count of four. So it's like going across the box, right? So at the top, inhale, then hold four, wait, hold four, exhale four, hold four, and then do that again.
Hmm.
Do that over, the period of time.
Hmm.
That's called square breathing or box breathing, and that can help regulate the nervous system.
Okay.
It teaches, types of skills to young people, and they have this, for their entire life, and they can teach others. So I think it's super important. And
Yeah.
most, and children have the capacity to learn how to breathe in this kind of way. They have the capacity, obviously depending on the age, but they have the capacity to go through 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 as they're learning their senses. I think as they learn their senses, when they're learning their senses,
Hmm.
right, it would be a great time to teach 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay. Now, did I hear you correctly? Because you used the word anxiety. Anxiety, is that a form of depression?
Oh, so they are two separate diagnoses, right? So anxiety is often co-occurring. So it often, if somebody has depression, they also have symptoms of anxiety. Not all the time, but that's a high likelihood that it's not somebody just dealing with depression.
Okay. 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 So, how is it that a person can go day by day or day after day and the people around them don't even know that they're, dealing with depression or that they are depressed? You
Mhm,
know, I can say, before the pandemic,
mhm.
I think a lot of us were already wearing a mask.
Absolutely. And you've already answered your question because that's what I was going to say. But continue, and then I'll answer.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. You're the professional.
Do an incredible job in the West, right? At wearing masks, like we have learned how to mask what we truly feel. We have learned how to do that, and we do it well. And
Hmm.
so, also because in certain cultures, and obviously within ours, when you show that there are some type of symptoms or deficits, right? I don't like to use that word, but I'm using it for today. Um, Certain types of things are punished, right? Or you don't, or it's uh, stigmatized, right? So you develop this sense of, well, I'm not going to say anything because people are going to perceive me as weak. We talked about that a little bit last week, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm not going to say anything because people might um, treat me differently at work, or I'm not going to say anything because I don't want anybody to think something's wrong with me, or nothing's wrong with me. I'm not going to say anything, right?
Mm.
So no, something's a little off, and we need to get a little help, right? But there's a lot of reasons why we um, adapt in that way. Like humans are adaptable, right? And so, when it comes down to how can someone be depressed and still be functioning, it's not the most severe or clinical depression, because clinically, if it's a severe depression, right, major depressive disorder, and it's severe reoccurring, like all the clinical diagnoses there, that particular depression is not going to lend itself well to anybody being able to function. Like it's challenging. But high functioning depression is a non-clinical label for a form of depression that isn't necessarily severe enough to be diagnosed as clinical.
Okay.
But there's a whole lot of reasons why, why we don't say anything.
Wow.
Isn't that really the biggest one?
Perception of what people may say or think, you know.
Hmm.
Yeah. I could see that. A lot of people, operate in the day to day thing, and when they really get still by themselves, that's when the depression symptoms come out. And they feel as though I could take the mask off now because I'm here. Um, it's kind of ironic that that commercial came out with the people holding up the paper,
Oh, right. Yeah.
smiling face.
Yep.
you know, and when I first saw it, I said, "Wow, there's so many people that are really actually living like that."
Absolutely.
You know, living the persona of I'm happy, I'm this, I'm that, but actually they're hurting
Um,
inside and afraid to say something, you know, because you may have been labeled that you are strong, you can do this, you done that, you got through this, you can handle that, you know, but sometimes I want somebody to just hold or say, it's gonna be okay, or help guide me,
that's right.
like we stated last week. Encouraging others sometimes help you in your depression, and I've been there. um and I've had to say, okay, when I got off from talking to whomever came to me for encouragement, and I'm like, okay, well, Lord, now who gonna come and encourage me,
Right.
you know but the more I did it, I did end up feeling better myself, you know, not realizing that that was a coping mechanism for myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I was, eventually you're saying, okay, I got to come up out of this because I got to be here for this person. This person is going to call me every so often. So I got to get it together for them.
Right.
So, listen, you have a book.
I do have a book.
You have a book. And tell me about this book because I want to know what caused you to birth
Mhm.
this book. Wait, we got a question here before we get going here. Let's see here. It stated, um, what kind of body language shows depression?
Yeah. So that one's a little tricky, Deborah. I talked about it a little earlier that sometimes the movements that people make are slowed. So if you're watching someone and they're just kind of, shuffling around when they walk, or they just they don't have motivation to move. Everything's kind of lethargic, right? Like you'll see that in how they are moving their body. So we call it psychomotor retardation, like that's what that's called. Um, you'll see maybe, the hanging head, right? They're just kind of not making eye contact a lot sometimes. They may be a little more passive in how they're presenting physically, right? So maybe almost like you look at them and they seem withdrawn physically. Those are some aspects. But the thing is, what makes it sticky is a lot of people don't also show like body language that they're depressed because again this mask that we were talking about, right? So if they know that at home they're feeling the pits and they're just kind of down in the dumps, and maybe their speech is slow and their movements are slow, when they get in public they turn that mask on, right? Like they flip the switch, and that's something that some people do. So sometimes it can be really difficult to look at somebody's body language and determine if they are depressed or not. Because the other aspect is, there's a lot you can deduce from body language, but it doesn't necessarily make that it doesn't necessarily mean that it's factual, right? Like I could be walking slow, but maybe it's because I'm tired, or I could be having slow movements because I'm in pain, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that there's depression there. So that was a little more sticky. It's harder to assess by just looking at somebody's movements.
Okay. All right. So now, what? Why was this book? Give me the is it a title to it? Um, what caused you to birth this? See, I don't want to say what kind of book it is. I want you to tell what kind of book it is. Um, yeah, come on, tell us about this book that you have put
I,
out here.
I created a book. It is, I don't know if you can really see it, but
Yes.
it's called Black, a coloring book.
Uh huh.
And you'll see it's very artistically designed. I have been thinking a lot about how this country has been really criminalizing Black folks, and just politically all that's going on. Like I don't even like to say his name, but the governor of Florida and just all that's going on with him and the
Mhm.
culture, just everything that has been really putting us in a negative light, right? And I
Yes.
often think about how the damage, the racial trauma that does to us as a collective. Okay. So it's one thing when we have to still show up to work after there has been a shooting like there was in Florida, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we are basically the target of these attacks. And then we have to process and digest that.
Mhm.
Most of us don't have people that we can digest that with, or a lot of us don't know who to talk to about those things. We just internalize it a lot of times.
Mhm.
And then we're still expected to show up at school knowing that this stuff has happened, still show up, perform at work, knowing that this stuff has happened, right? And for me, I think about the collective toll that it takes over time, right,
Yeah.
on Black and brown folks who are exposed to this on the regular. And so for me, it was about creating something where not only would it be empowering for myself, right, it would inspire others. So I created a coloring book using AI technology, but me coming up with the prompts and that's a whole nother discussion. But I created this book with the mindset of I want positive images to be portrayed that everybody, no matter what age they are, right, in the Black community, they can look at this book and feel some inspiration and they can engage with the book. And I wanted the book to be an experience for folks. Because, when it comes down to coloring, first of all, coloring is very therapeutic. Any type of art expression is very therapeutic. And
Okay.
there's research on that, so you guys can look that up in terms of coloring and art therapy and those types of things. But when you take time to engage with the pages of this particular coloring book, it makes you feel good. Like I wanted to have uplifting images and futuristic images, because I'm somebody, I think I shared in last week that I love Marvel, right? And
Mhm.
I'm not a big like comic book person, like I mean kind of a little bit, but I love Marvel and I like just being in a fantasy world,
Me
right?
too. Mhm.
What kind of images can I come up with that kind of take me out of the day to day that feel futuristic in a sense, right?
Right.
Um, merging that with culture. And so that's what I've done with this coloring book. And so, up to this point, I had not seen anything like it on the market.
Right.
And there's a lot of Black coloring books, but there is not
Right.
one like this one. And so, Yeah, that was the motivation behind it. I wanted it to be something that would be experienced by all who engage with it, as something that can be inspiring and motivational, and they can reflect on their own selves. It can be a tool for relaxation. And then, and this is for any audience members that are non-Black, I also wanted it to be a tool that can be used in white folks and anybody else that's viewing, a tool for them to engage in some of those anti-racist conversations with people in their circles of influence and in their families. Because a lot of time, when everything happened in 2020, with like George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter and all the protests, and there was a
Yeah.
lot, we saw a lot of unity, right? We saw a lot of
Right.
people,
Right.
that were, fighting for the cause, different races and cultures. And it felt good to know that, we had these folks supporting us. And I had friends who I grew up with, white friends who I grew up with, who were like, what else can we do? And they were, really trying to go, hard for us, right? And I
Right.
appreciated. Um, but also, it kind of died down over time, right? And every so often, I'll hit people on my Facebook page and say, white folks that follow me, like, listen, are y'all still advocating? Are you still speaking out? Are you doing things, right? And
Right.
challenging your racist uncle or your dad? Or like, are you speaking out against the injustices? And I'm somebody who's very adamant about calling people out about that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially grew up in an environment where we had pretty decent race relations, and it was about 50-50, like black to white. And so, anybody that grew up with me, I'm going to call you out because I know how we grew up, right?
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
yeah, like, I would love for, non-black folks to get this book. And I've had plenty who have. Definitely the people I grew up with have rocked with me, and they've purchased. And Latin folks have reached out and purchased it as well. But it can be used as such a tool. How powerful is it to be able to say, I got this black coloring book. I'm a white, but I'm going to let my kids use this as a coloring book. And now we can also discuss the positive images of black people because they're seeing the negative images too in the
Yeah.
media and everything else, right? But
Right.
now they see, a black child in this book smiling at them, right? Or futuristic, and be able to connect. And this also opens up discussion for, families, right? Like white families or any other families that can say, listen, what are your thoughts about what you just colored, right? And
Right.
racial discussions about it. So there are a lot of reasons that went into it. I'm really excited about it, and it's doing really well so far. Thank you.
That's wonderful. You can get it on Amazon, uh, Barnes and Noble. Is it in
Yeah,
Barnes and Noble?
out on Barnes and Noble. I just checked the other day, but you can definitely get it on Amazon. And next week it'll be back on Barnes and Noble.
Okay. 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 Um, I kind of figured when I first saw it, I said, "Oh, this is for therapy. This is therapeutic. This right here." Because I know some people that do the coloring app,
Yep.
and I'm like, "Why are you coloring and you grown?" But then I thought about it, and I'm like, "Okay, yeah. So they're using it as a, like some I've noticed, they play their games."
Yeah.
Some are gamers. I used to, be like, I am not going to be downloading any games on my phone, taking up space, and sitting there on my phone. And guess what? I do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
do. Certain games. I like the crossword
Okay.
puzzles, word puzzles. And sometimes, especially when I've had one of those days, when I get in bed before I can just really just, how you to wind down, um, I'll open up my crossword puzzle and I'm gonna do my crossword puzzle. I may go to. I think I got like three of them. I'll go from one, do so many on that one. Two, do so many. Three, do so many, and then I'll shut it down. And that seems like it kind of unwinds me. You know, um, and I know that there's some out there that are like, well, you're supposed to be this and you're supposed to be that, and just read the word and all that and everything. Amen. And I'm not discarding that. Yes, you can read the word, and you can unwind with that, and sometimes I do both, or either or. But when I don't, because most of the time I've already did the word earlier in the evening. So when it's late at night and I'm laying there and I can't go right off to sleep, I may pick up my phone and do my puzzle, you know. So my book is coming. I
Okay.
wanted to have it before, but I got distracted getting ready for school and didn't get to order mine. But it's coming because
Okay.
I looked at that and I said, oh, okay, yeah, coloring book, huh? Yes, I'm going to get mine.
Thank you. And I'll be curious to hear what your experience is. What's been beautiful about it is, people are sharing, how they're able to relax and how it's been a stress reliever. But the beauty that I've also heard is those who have been in recovery from like maybe surgery, and they picked it up, right? Somebody bought it for them, and it's actually been helping them in that way, right? And so
Hmm.
healing through some trauma that some folks have experienced. And so I've had people actually reach back out to me and tell me that it's been helping them in that way. So very therapeutic. And
That's good. That's good. We all need something. Like you said, you went over the coping strategies, the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Um, you've answered so many questions. And depression, as you stated last week, starting out, that is such a broad subject. Um, I want to thank you again for coming on to Monday Moments with Patrina L. And hopefully we can do this again.
I look forward to it.
It has been very informative. I don't know about any of my audience, but I have been very enlightened in these two sessions or episodes, or however they label them on the podcast. But I have been very enlightened, especially with the fact that, certain foods can bring about depression, so it has been very, very informative. And I really appreciate you taking the time to really even break down, everything that was said, how you broke everything down. I really appreciate it. And
Thank
thank you for coming on so much. I thank you. Like I said, those of you out there, get the book. It's entitled Black Coloring Book, Volume 1 by Rogjett Peterson. Look for it on Amazon. Y'all know y'all go on Amazon for everything. So
you.
just go on there and get the book and get you some either coloring markers or crayons and or coloring pencils, and go ahead on and start coloring, okay? That way you can get your therapy going on while you're on the wait list for your therapist, all right?
There will be a wait list.
So if anyone wanted to get in touch with you, are you taking new clients? How can they?
So So here's the thing: I'm not taking any new clients currently. I'm kind of at my I have a wait list. So,
Okay, you have a waiting list. That's a good thing. That
yeah.
means that you're good.
So I just have those who are on the wait list, like they're scheduled to start pretty soon. And then I'm not taking any clients for a while. But if you wanted to check out my Psychology Today profile, you would just go to Psychology Today, and then
Okay.
look for my name there, and then you can see my profile there. And it has contact information as well.
Okay, psychologytoday.com.
Is there a way to put something in the chat
Uh-huh. I will put it on the in the
to it? Okay.
you did you put it in the comment section?
Oh, chat.
Okay.
I think only you and I can see.
So we're gonna make sure we get this out. And if there's nothing else from anyone else, I'm trying to move it. There you go. Let me see. Did that work? Did not. Okay.
The easiest way would be for them to just go to Psychology Today and then just put my name in the chat. And
Okay. I'll make sure I get this link out. But thank you so much. Love you, love you, love you. We will be talking soon again. And again, thank you for your time. And I'll let you go to your fur baby. All right. You have a blessed night, okay? Thank you. You all, thank you for tuning in to Monday Moments with Patrina L. We look forward to seeing you next week at 7 p.m. Right here, same place, same um, time on the Facebook page and also youtube.com at EPL Ministry 1779. We love you. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, have a blessed night.